Hello, my name is Emily Owens, and I'm the State Director for Virginia Science Olympiad. In this video, I'll provide additional training information for event supervisors of chemistry events. First, thank you for being an event supervisor. Science Olympiad doesn't happen without people like you volunteering your time on tournament days to do science with our students. So thank you so much for taking on this role. If you've never been an event supervisor for VASA before, we strongly encourage you to watch the general What is an Event Supervisor video on our YouTube channel and website resources page first, that broadly defines the roles and expectations of what an event supervisor will do. You should also watch the general event supervisor training video. The video that you are watching now is going to cover additional specifics associated with running a chemistry event, but the general training is also information that you should know as a chemistry event supervisor. This video is simply meant to be a supplement. So in addition to the general information that is provided to you by your tournament directors or your event group leaders in advance of tournament day, chemistry events have additional supplies, including chemicals, lab equipment, goggles, other personal protective equipment, etc. VASO or other tournament host sites will provide all chemicals and lab equipment at regional and state tournaments in Virginia. So you don't have to worry about preparing chemicals and bringing in lab equipment if you're an event supervisor for us at regionals or at state. For invitational tournaments, if you're watching this for the information provided, but are not working at a VASO-sponsored tournament, please confirm with your tournament director what you are expected to bring, as their expectations may be different. If you have your own goggles, please plan to bring them. Your own goggles are always going to be more comfortable and fit you better than the goggles that may be provided by the tournament site. If you don't have your own goggles, that's fine. VASO tournaments do have extras to loan to supervisors, but note that we never loan them to participants. We have just a handful of pairs for our chemistry and build event supervisors. If you haven't yet taken a look at a set of chemistry rules, I'm going to go through a little bit more information about them here than I did in the general event supervisor training, because there is more information on chem event rules than in the event parameters section than for many other events. This is all because of the safety equipment and lab items. But I also encourage you to check out our Reading the Rules video that also does a really good job of going through how to approach a set of rules for any event. For chemistry events, you'll notice that there's a line that says eye protection. This is related to the type of goggles that students must wear for their event. And I'll talk more about what those specific goggles will look like. But note that each participant must bring safety equipment to this event. They also, can bring a pencil and a calculator, and they may have cheat sheets or whatever, but it is a requirement that they have their safety equipment. If they don't have a cheat sheet, they're at a disadvantage, but they can still compete. But the safety equipment is non-negotiable. So you'll see in 2D for this example set of chemistry lab rules from 2024 that it says participants must wear goggles, an apron or a lab coat, and have skin covered from the neck down to the wrist and toes. And then it says some stuff about about gloves. Pants should also be loose fitting. And then shoulder length or longer hair must be tied back. These are requirements. This is one of your additional duties as a chemistry event supervisor, on top of the check-ins that you do when they come to the door for wristbands and team numbers. You must check that they have their safety equipment. They must have their goggles. They must have an apron or a lab coat. They must be covered from the neck down to their wrist and toes. That means closed-toed shoes. That means long sleeves. That means long pants. And the pants should be loose fitting, so they can't be leggings. They must be looser than that, and they must have their hair tied back. The rules here also do outline that supervisors will be providing, certain reagents, additional glassware, etc. But that's all the stuff that you'll work out with the tournament director or event group leader about what will be provided for you versus what you yourself have to bring. It also notes in 2C that there are lab equipment lists of things that teams can bring. They are not required, but if they don't bring them, they'll be at a disadvantage. And I'll talk through those as well. But I want to first make sure we understand exactly the expectation around safety equipment. Again, participants cannot enter the competition room without the required safety equipment. VASO has a personal protective equipment policy that is posted on our website and is available on like the event specific pages for chemistry lab, for forensics, for crime busters, for potions and poisons, for whatever chem events may be running that year. And this is just a screenshot of a section from it where it clearly shows the type of goggles that are permitted to be used in a chem event. So category C eye protection, which is required for chemistry events, means they must be indirect vent goggles. That's what the picture on the left is. So they have to be close fitting to the face, and they have to have those indirect vents, those little black knobs that are on these goggles. They may not be black on all pairs. They may be white, they may be clear, they may be different colors, but they have to have those indirect vents. And those vents have to be closed. So if they're the type that pop up and down, they have to be popped down. They have to be closed. They must have those indirect vents. They absolutely cannot have direct vent goggles, which are the ones on the right that have the holes, open ventilation holes. Those are not permitted. If a student shows up with those goggles, you are not allowed to let them enter the room. If they do not have the required goggles, they can go back to their team to get it, but they don't get to make up the missed time. Or if one partner has the correct goggles, but another one does not, the one partner can start without the other, and the other one can join them when they have the correct safety equipment. Okay, but they must have indirect vent chemical splash goggles. You'll notice also at the bottom of that picture that there's a category B goggles. Okay, so those are ones that are not chemical splash appropriate because they're open, right? They're more like sunglasses in style. So those can be used for some of our build events, but they are not permitted for chemistry events. They must be indirect vent, chemical splash protection goggles, close fitting to the face with those vents closed. I also mentioned that they must have a lab coat or apron for these chemistry events. So this picture here is showing you what is probably the most common form of a lab apron that you will encounter. Whatever their lab apron or coat is, it must cover the torso and extend to at least mid-thigh. Okay, so they cannot be aprons that are very short that end like at their hips. They must be to at least mid-thigh. The students in this picture would not be eligible to enter into our labs because of their short sleeves. So they must have long sleeves if they're wearing an apron. If they're wearing a lab coat and the lab coat has long sleeves, that's fine. Okay. But those aprons should be for chemistry labs. They should not be kitchen aprons. Okay. The best ones are going to be that like rubberized vinyl apron that you can see in this picture. There may be other varieties that look more like a traditional plastic, but they should not be cloth like kitchen aprons that you could buy at Williams Sonoma or something. Okay. Occasionally there is an event that requires a lab coat specifically, not aprons, and in that case it must be a long sleeved coat. But most of the chemistry events allow for a lab coat or apron. And if they don't have it, they can go back to their team and get it, but they don't get to make up that missed time and they cannot enter the room without it. That's what's required in terms of the safety equipment. Then there are the lists of recommended lab equipment. So according to the event rules, teams are permitted to bring in select chemistry lab equipment. They can compete without it. So if you have a team show up that doesn't have a box of equipment, but they do have their goggles and their aprons, they can compete. They're just going to be at a disadvantage and not be able to do some of the lab tasks. Your job in this realm is to check that they just don't have any additional equipment not on the list that's not indicated in the column for their given event. So if they're missing equipment, that's okay in this regard, but they can't have extra equipment that's not on the list. So here's what I mean. This is an example equipment grid. This is from the 2024 rule book for Division C. And you can see that we have chemistry lab and forensics, environmental chemistry, and material science listed. So not all of these events run every year, but a handful of them do. And so you can see for chemistry lab, anything with an X in that column, students are allowed to bring. If it doesn't have an X, they cannot bring it for that event. So there's a lot of things listed on here, right? They could have a box that has graduated cylinders and beakers and Erlenmeyer flasks and test tubes. That's a lot of glassware. They don't have to bring all of that. They could have, picked and chosen from that list what they wanted to include in their kit. But if you see slides or cover slips in their chemistry lab kit, they're not permitted to have those. You please have them remove them and put them in like a designated area in the room that they can't access during the event. You'll notice also that since the materials change between the events, right? Chem lab can't have slides and cover slips, but forensics can. So it's possible that they have a kit that covers both of the events, but they must remove and not use the materials that are not allowed for their specific event they're competing in at that time. So this is equipment that they'll be bringing in a box. You don't have to check it at the door, right? That would create quite a bottleneck to be able to do that. But you could be checking it, once they come into the room at their lab stations as the event is going. But the safety equipment is required and they must have before they enter the room. The lab equipment is recommended, but not required. In using the lab equipment, they're, doing experimentation, doing labs with chemicals. One of your main jobs is to make sure that students are performing lab tasks safely. Students must wear their goggles and other personal protective equipment at all times. If you see students without their goggles over their eyes, please remind them immediately. Okay. You also can consider a penalty for that, especially if it's, more than once, but it is not appropriate to penalize but not correct their behavior because this is about safety. So please make sure that if you see a student not appropriately wearing their safety equipment, that you correct them immediately and make sure that they have their goggles, their aprons on, etc. You should be monitoring chemical and glassware usage in case of spills or breakage. Of course, you may also have to monitor chemical usage in case they run out of something and you have to refill it. But from a safety perspective, in case of a spill, we do these events in lab spaces that may have spill kits or directions provided to you from the event group leader. Broken glassware, again, chem spaces have broken glassware boxes with brooms and dustpans to clean it up. But please make sure that students are not picking up broken pieces of glass. They should call you over. Please give them the instruction that in the case of a spill or glass breakage, that they immediately alert you and you handle it as the supervisor in the room. Spillage happens, glassware breakage happens. Sometimes it is, just a product of, an errant elbow or something like that. And that doesn't mean that what they're doing is unsafe, right? However, if they are doing something unsafe, they're using a piece of equipment inappropriately, like they clearly don't know how to use it, or they, light a Bunsen burner, but then leave it unattended, something that is it unsafe and demonstrates that they do not know the correct safe behavior, it is your job to correct them immediately. And you also can tell them that they're not permitted to do that anymore. If a student is not using a burner correctly in forensics, you can tell them that they're not permitted to use it any further. Again, you can also penalize them for unsafe behavior. You are in charge as the event supervisor, not just of the test and the results, but also of their safety, and safety is a part of the skills we're evaluating. If the event, it goes smoothly, you're at the end, you're looking at cleanup, teams should be cleaning up their lab spaces. Please hold them to that. And please note the teams that don't clean up. There is a cleanup penalty in the rules associated with that. The cleanup is also part of their event time. So please give them, check-ins on time so that they know how much time they have left to finish and to clean up. Okay. They do not get to go past the event time to finish their cleanup. It is included in the event itself. Okay. And again, penalize if they don't clean up or they don't appropriately do it in the time allotted. Be sure to reset the lab stations for the next session before letting the next students in. That could be, refilling any chemicals, returning any glassware that, you wanted in a different spot to begin with. But also feel free to give those instructions to the previous session so that they can do that for you as part of their cleanup. But just double checking that everything is in the right place and all the chemicals that you need are accessible before the next group comes in is very helpful. Please follow provided guidelines from the tournament director or the event group leader on chemical disposal and cleanup. They may have waste containers for you that you have to use. There may be certain things that they're asking you to save or things that can go directly in the trash, but please follow their guidance so that we're compliant with the host site's safety expectations. And then after your last session, please make sure the lab areas are cleaned and returned to their original setup, just as you do with a written testing area before you leave. If you've had to move any equipment that was already out on benches, please, move it back, but leave it exactly as you originally found it when you came in the morning. Thank you so much for giving your time to help our students do science safely. Again, if you have not watched the general event supervisor training video, please plan to do that. This video was only a supplement of information unique to chemistry events. And if you have any questions in advance of your event, please do not hesitate to reach out to your tournament director or event group leader, whoever your point of contact has been about the chemistry event. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to check out our social media platforms and follow us on Facebook, on X, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. And we look forward to seeing you this tournament season.